Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO at Metal Blade Records, home to bands like Cannibal Corpse, Amon Amarth, Bitch, Killswitch Engage, and many, many, many more over the last 43 years. Kind of scary to say that. This episode, we're going to talk about the great band Cynic and their song Veil of Maya, a classic 1990s recording. Very influential. Any extreme band will cite this as one of their biggest influences, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk to my good friend Jason Suecof, his first time ever on the podcast, legendary producer down in Florida, and then we're going to talk to Chaney Crabb from the band Entheos. This is another one of our Nashville experiences when we're down there for that Rockin' Pod. So it should be a lot of fun, and as always, it begins with the great Mr. Martin Popoff.
Yes, absolutely important track, Brian. Good choice. Cynic, Veil of Maya from Focus. So Cynic is one of those important visionary bands in a certain subgenre. Here we're talking death metal, taking death metal, progressive metal to new heights of heaviness, complexity, jazz. We've got mainstay, Paul Masvidal, vocals, guitar synthesizer. That's the other thing about this. Well, everything about this is pretty unique. So essentially, yeah, we've got an album, came out on Roadrunner, produced at Morris Sound by Scott Burns, September 14th, 1993. Focus. So after this, the band broke up eventually and then reformed later and made more material and are based, importantly in California, but they started as this Florida situation. And this album is considered a mainstay, a legendary milestone of very forward-thinking progressive metal. I mean, we are already well beyond Dream Theater, but it's a little bit more in the spirit of your Watchtowers and your Voivod and Mekong Delta and even Death. And speaking of Death, a lot of tragedy in this band. Paul Masvidal, of course, is still the mainstay of the band, but Jason Goebel, a guitar synthesizer. But we had Sean Malone, bass, Chapman Stick here, and Sean Reinhardt, drum, keyboards. Both Seans are no longer with us. And Tony Teagarden on the death growl. So that's kind of an interesting situation with this album as well. Paul was worried about his voice at the time, and he did the clean vocals, but he used a vocoder. And we've got the death growls in here as well. So, or gruff vocals, whatever you want to call them, death metal vocals. They're not particularly extreme, and we're playing over a very sympathetic, well-recorded, jazzy behaved, conservative sort of production of this very complicated futuristic death metal. But, you know, the idea with the vocals here is that you are really getting kind of a blueprint that we would hear all the way up into today's very extreme sort of deathcore music. But, you know, also along the way in things like emo and things like Opeth, right? So you get a little bit of that kind of starting here as well. But what you really get more than anything is an incredibly important progressive metal album with emphasis on metal. So we're moving beyond, you know, progressive rock or heavy progressive rock or Rush's version of progressive metal. We are really pushing the boundaries of extreme music forward. And yeah, so in this we've got fretless bass. Most of what you hear in a keyboard sense is actually done on guitar synthesizers. So there's just a lot of super interesting things about this. But yeah, this is an absolute classic. It is the opening track of Cynic Focus from Roadrunner. And like I say, they do come back later and they do more great music. Very interestingly, you get the one and done sort of situation in the 90s, and they're absolutely just crushing it. And this album actually got quite famous for that reason. Really cool cover art as well. But there you go. Veil of Maya, Cynic.
Thanks, Martin.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Always appreciate you doing this, and always great to have a little history and Martin's take on these songs too. It's a lot of fun. We now welcome in a first-timer here on the podcast talking about production. He's worked with probably 1,000 bands. I would take 20 minutes to give them all, but some of them are Black Dahlia Murder, Job for Cowboy, Trivium, Whitechapel, many, 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 many more. The great legendary producer, Mr. Jason Suecof. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm good. Oh, and you're also a member of Charred Walls of the Damned as well.
I am.
I had to put that in there too. How's the studio down there, my friend?
It's going good. Just doing the thing.
So we're talking about the legendary song by Cynic, Veil of Maya, one of the most influential of the heavy, well, really prog and heavy stuff. Came out in 1993 and, of course, was done by the great Scott Burns at the legendary Morris Sound Studios. What do you make of the production on this one?
You know, I listened to it last night again because it's been a second since I've listened to that specific song. But, I think it still holds up. Especially Sean's drums, and I'm automatically if the drums aren't good, everything else is shot guy.
Yep.
And just listen. But Sean always made everything sound amazing. Like, I think it'd be hard to make him sound bad. I guess it could easily be done if you had no idea. I don't know. It'd just be hard for anyone that knows a little bit to make him sound bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean you had the great Scott Burns there as well, so he's not going to make anything sound bad. And Morris Sound, which is such an amazing studio. Did you ever get to work at Morris Sound?
Absolutely. I tracked the drums for Ascendancy at Morris Sound.
Yeah, I knew you did. I was
and Jim,
you're close.
I'm personal friends with Tom and Jim. Jim taught me a lot. Like when I moved down here, I went down there and I asked Jim to show me stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because I was obviously a huge fan of all the Florida stuff, and growing up, everything was Morris Sound. So that's where I wanted to go and see and hang out at every second if I could.
And I guess it's owned by TSO now. They control it.
Yeah, I guess it's their practice place or whatever.
Yeah, we're trying to see if I said a couple people that wanted to do something there. We're trying to see if they're allowed to, if TSO would let them do something there. So
it's honestly the greatest drum room. Like still, if I could track at any drum room, that would be the room that I choose as the A room there for sure.
Yeah, Florida of all places, it has so many great studios. You've got Morris Sound, you've got Criterion Miami, your place outside of Orlando. Mm-hmm. I guess the weather helps just for having year-round accessibility of stuff, but it's interesting that so many of these legendary studios are all in Florida.
Yeah, the summers are a little tough sometimes with the storms because you got to shut down whenever there's actual, no matter how many surge protectors and whatever you got, except for you to put big stuff on UPS is expensive, but you need to unplug when there's lightning because it can go through the ground and fry all your stuff.
Oh, that's right. Now that I think about it, because I did a bunch of stuff. We did, a couple of 6 Feet Under records at Morris Sound. We had a lot of bands recording there. And then we did a bunch of 6 Feet stuff down in Criteria.
I was there when they were doing the AC/DC
Yeah.
cover.
I was not there. Yeah, he didn't want to tell me about that, but it's a whole other story.
Oh,
no, it's okay. No, I obviously I knew about it eventually, but
right.
the story behind that is 6 Feet Under. Chris Barnes redid Back in Black album as an entire album. He didn't want to tell me about it because he knows that I would have said that's not a good idea, but he did it anyway and put it out. But it came out pretty cool. And there's a legendary video of them doing TNT at I believe it was Summer Breeze, one of those festivals over in Germany where there's 30,000 Germans going crazy and singing TNT. And we actually put it on their DVD, but we had to get approval from AC/DC because anytime you put out something on video, you have to get the artist's approval. And we're like, this is never going to happen. But it took them 3 months, but they said, yeah, sure, go ahead and use it. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
But back to Cynic, such an interesting band. This song is really interesting because it's such an early part of the whole death metal scene. The death metal was starting to come out. It's so unique, and they were so far ahead of their time because they're incorporating so many different things in their music, from progressive to heavy. And I don't think anybody was really doing that back then.
No, I mean, there were a couple, like Watchtower was, but everyone kind of had like one style of vocals, I think, that they were going with. And even before Focus came, because by the time Focus came out, I had already been listening. You remember At Death's Door 2, that compilation, and it had your Bork Forms on it. So I've been listening to your, that's how I became a Cynic fan, was listening to that. And obviously Human, because Paul and Sean were on that. So by the time that came, so when I heard Vila Maya, that was the first time being like, what? Like, whoa, like what's going, and it had the computer vocals.
Yeah. It had all sorts of stuff. It would have been interesting to be in the studio for that record too, because again, so much stuff going on, and you've got, like I said before, the great Scott Burns and Morris sound. Is there anything that you notice in the production that you find unusual? Or is it just kind of, it is what it is?
No, from what I've heard, I remember reading something, I guess the guitars, like the main rhythm guitars, aren't panned 100 and 100 like they normally are.
Huh.
And that would drive me crazy. But I guess, I could be wrong, but I'm trying, honestly, I think I remember, I barely read anything. I hate reading, but since I remember sort of reading that, I'm going to go with that. It happened. And so not going 100 and 100 with the guitars left and right that's probably, I don't know, in my opinion, that's an unmetal thing to do.
Really? It's interesting because back when I used to produce stuff, we played around with a lot of the panning and sort of stuff. More, not really that way. But I remember there's one, I can't remember which band it was, but there was one band that we did the panning like that with. I think it might have been Omen, just because they just had one guitar player. So we felt it sounded like two guitars, but it was still just one. But I agree. I'm the old school way of I want to have a guitar in each speaker.
Right. And then it's like obviously at that point, part of the left is on the right and part of the right is on the left.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, I would just go insane. But I'm just talking about with rhythms.
Yeah.
It's obviously normal for overdubs and whatever else to be panned like that, or anywhere that's not 100 and 100 that feels appropriate. So that's I think that's normal. But from what I remember, I believe hearing that about that, and I'm sure there was a million other things that they did that were done first on that, or at least stuff back then. Back in 93, it wasn't like now where everyone's doing studio updates and there's just a lot of information about what's going on with every album.
Yeah, it was still old school too back then. So, everything was still old school, which I prefer a lot of that older stuff just because it's less overproduced, which obviously some of the stuff gets now. What was your impression when you first heard this song, though?
It's the first song on the thing, I believe. So
first one on the record. Yep.
So it was like I said, hearing the clean vocals for me was kind of a shock because I had heard your Bork Forms for so long, and that was part of what the demo, which had 3 or 4 songs, in which I can't remember how many because it's hard to get a hold of anything when you're 12 or 13 back, and so I can't remember, but that was part of that demo. And so when I heard that song, I wasn't shocked by any of the playing because I already expected the playing to be sick and everything like that. But it was awesome to hear John Malone, hearing the bass pop out the way that it did that was different than the previous demo with Tony Choi.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's interesting because they had some of the clean vocals on here, and that was, I think, one of the earliest times where you mix the clean and the super heavy vocals too.
Yeah, it was like them, and I think you talked with the guy too, the guy who's doing that Roadrunner documentary.
Yes.
And we were talking about this exact thing, and I was saying it was like Fear Factory kind of felt like the first good cop, bad cop vocal kind of thing, But it wasn't like now, it was kind of different. You know what I'm saying? I can't explain it. It just was what it was then.
Yeah, it's just, and I try to explain to people that don't, because they're, some of the older folks don't like the heavy vocal. But I always tell them, well, basically what happened with music was that, the music was getting heavier and heavier, but the vocals just really couldn't, because if you're singing, there's only so much you can do when you're singing. So all of a sudden, here we go, Chuck from Death and, others that started this whole thing, started these vocals being much heavier, which made the music heavier. But the early stuff, like you mentioned with Fear Factory and even here with Cynic, the clean vocals weren't super clean. They're just kind of clean-ish. And then the heaviest stuff wasn't super heavy as much as heavier. So it kind of worked. It was like experimentation a little bit.
Yeah, it was even more so of like a vocoder for the Cynic stuff. I don't even know if it was considered. It might have just been like kind of like a talking sort of vibe. Paul now sings. He's got a great voice, as you can hear on the newer stuff. But back then, I think they were using kind of more of like a vocoder type of deal. So it was like not auto-tune, but an actual thing. So it was always perfect. And then they had that chick on that song too. Then it was, there's a little the bend thing, and it's all kind of creepy over the clean guitars before it kicks back in and it's all sick again.
Like I said, it's just all over the map. That when you talk to so many, especially extreme artists, I mean, they all count this as being one of their biggest influences. This record, particularly.
Yeah. Obviously, it is. I remember, what was it? The three, and they used to market these three together. There was like this one, Pestilence, and Believer. Remember, they had that ad. It was those three together all the time. It was just like, well, Cynic. I'm a Pestilence fan, but I'm a Testimony of the Ancients guy.
Yeah, awesome.
But Cynic, it's the beginning of, well, like I said, besides like Watchtower, kind of, this is the album, the start of it. Besides the demo.
Yeah, exactly. We were talking to Chaney from Entheos about this track, and I asked her, like, who do you want to talk about? And, sometimes the guests will go like, oh, you pick a song, or they'll pick an artist and we'll kind of pick a song together. But she's really like Cynic, Veil of Maya. That was something. That was the only thing she wanted to do. So I'm like, all right, that's a good one for me. So it just again proves how huge an influence they are, even on like younger artists that are happening today.
Yeah, there's a lot of techie stuff going on today. I feel like a lot more techie stuff now going on than there was back then, for sure.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting too. I've kind of noticed this with some stuff these days. And I was just down in Nashville where we interviewed Chaney and a whole bunch of other people, and your old friend Mark Lewis we have on several times. But it's interesting because the new Entheos stuff they're working on has a very 90s feel to it. I was listening to a couple of songs and I go, wow, it has that kind of 90s vibe to it. And I know that the 90s are back finally, which I like, because it's like this lost decade of metal where so many people just like, oh, well, the 90s were terrible for metal. It was awful. For the mainstream, sure, but the underground was thriving. I mean, you had all these, you had Cynic record came out in 1993, and you had Cannibal Corpse and, all the big death metal bands with Morbid and all this stuff. So there's a lot of really good music there, but it's interesting how now, even in like the extreme world, and you could tell me if you notice this with stuff you're working on these days, but there's a lot of that kind of 90s stuff is trying to creep back into the new stuff.
Yeah, I know Mark's triple two is like, man, everything's fucking gridded out. I'm fucking trying to take that grid, just fuck the grid, man. Back when you had tape, you can put a click there, but it ain't gonna be like you can do with Pro Tools, It just is. And I think, that's a product of the early 2000s of sometimes you made some stuff exist that couldn't necessarily exist in the first place.
Is it difficult to go back? Because its production is so much different now than it was in the 90s, basically. Is it difficult to go back and try to kind of sort of not recreate it, but have a similar vibe to that today? It seems like it can be done, but it's not easy.
I think you need the players to be at a certain level. Like, obviously, you can't. Like, if you have a band that's just like so shot in the first place, that's not going to work. But obviously, if you got a good band that knows what's up, and you commit to the vibe, you're like, all right, I'm just not going to go to a certain place with it. But then you just got to run with that exact vibe the whole time. That's all.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what are you working on these days?
Necrogoblicon.
Nice.
Doing some necro. Doing a couple of things that I can't say because of rules.
I like those. Those are always the good ones. Like I have to sign all these, clauses and stuff. You can't talk about this. It's why I hate to say anything about anything because there's about 15 things I can't talk about. Some of them are finally coming out, so it's like, oh, I can finally talk about that now.
Yeah,
so I hear you.
Those are good things.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. Great to see you. Thanks for all the insights, and I'm sure we'll get you back on again.
Awesome, man. Whenever you want.
As you can tell by the background noise, we are still here in Nashville at the Rock and Pod Expo. Now I get to talk with an artist on Metal Blade, which is always fun to do, and a social media superstar, and also the lead singer from Entheos, Chaney Crabb. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I love it when I ask somebody to do the podcast. Sometimes I have a song already in mind that I'm going to do, but a lot of times I'll say, like, who do you want to talk about? And you were very Cynic, Veil of Maya. I love it on my list already. And this is on the heavier front, which is good because we always talk about a lot of that stuff too. But Cynic was an important band because they combined so many different genres into one and were doing things that really nobody else was doing, and it had such an influence on so many bands came after them. Why did you pick them?
I picked Cynic because I think that, well, first of all, the type of music that I play, I don't think would exist in the same way that it does without Cynic, specifically Paul's vocals in Cynic, because, Cynic was, to me, the first band that really brought together, like, the Zappa with metal. They obviously have the death mixture with melodic vocals and screaming, and that's famously why Cynic broke up in the first place, right? Because they were such an out there band. They toured with Cannibal Corpse. Yep. They were so poorly received that it led them to breaking up after Focus came out. I think they broke up the first time in like 94. So their influence couldn't be seen at that point, but how influential that band has been in progressive death metal. I was saying this to you the other day. There are bands that I can't even see existing at all without Cynic. Between the Buried in Me is one. The Contortionists, the Faceless. There are just like so many. You can hear their influence across the entire genre to this day. And it's crazy to me that a band that was so poorly received out the gate has had that much influence on the genre.
But that happens a lot. Like when you do something that different that nobody else has done before, there's countless examples of some band that you would think, wow, why didn't they get bigger? Because they were doing something that no one else was doing, and you couldn't really put them in a scene. But when you go back and look at what they're doing, how they've influenced like so many bands over so many genres, and I felt really bad because you mentioned that they broke up after that Cannibal tour, and I saw them on that Cannibal tour a couple of times. And same thing, I was like mind blown about what they were doing and how well they did it. But yeah, the crowds are Cannibal crowds can be tough sometimes.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that was
especially then, I would assume.
I think it was, no offense to Cannibal Corpse fans in 1994, but it was kind of over their heads, I think.
I understandably so, right? I mean, it still is kind of over people's heads. Cynic hasn't really made it to mainstream fame, and I think it is over people's heads. But the people who are truly touched by that band, you're either like a super fan or you're not into them at all. And truth be told, if I were to pick like my favorite Cynic song, it would be a way newer. It would be off of Kindly Bent to Free Us, probably, which came out 10 years ago maybe. But Veil of Maya specifically has been, there's a band named Veil of Maya, you know? And it's funny because every time I hear Veil of Maya's name, Veil of Maya plays in my head over and over. But it's it's just like, as far as this genre goes, that song, that album, the sound of Focus, the fretless bass, all of these things that are so kind of like mainstays in the genre now, they didn't occur then in music, really.
Yeah, I'm not like the proprietor of the history of death metal at all, but it's, most people will agree, I think the two most influential bands to the death metal scene would be Death and Cynic. Death for starting it all, pretty much,
right.
And then Cynic for just being so unique and different and combining the real singing and the guttural singing, because it wasn't really until the hardcore deathcore sort of stuff came in, the metalcore, that you kind of saw more and more of that. And all those bands go back to like Cynic as being one. And I love your comparing it to Zappa, because I was listening to it the other day and I was like, man, there's so much here to unpack between the death metal, between the jazz parts of it. And the Zappa thing is perfect, because there's parts of that song that you could absolutely see Frank Zappa do.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard for me to separate. You know how sometimes you just hear bands and you're like, okay, I can tell exactly where this influence comes. For me, with Cynic, it's a lot of Zappa. I can't imagine what it was like to be playing that kind of music in 93. I was 4 years old then. So grunge was what was becoming popular, and we were kind of transitioning out of hair metal into grunge, and there was some death metal around, but it was still a fairly new concept. And for a band like Cynic to exist, which even now in 2025 is still kind of like on the outer edges of metal, even for progressive metal people, like Cynic kind of goes a lot of different places. It's not always like a concise song, and it's not for everyone. So to exist now is even kind of strange for them, but to exist in that year or even before that with the demo, I just can't imagine.
Yeah, I think they're getting more and more appreciation now, certainly than they did then. And I guarantee you, like in 5 or 10 years, they'll be looked at as like one of the most influential bands ever in the heavy genre, and even in the progressive genre, because you're talking about a band like Between the Buried and Me, which you're 100% right there. Like they're so similar to what Cynic was doing, and I know those guys are all big fans. I think they're all really good about talking about the influence with Cynic, but I almost think to myself sometimes, like, shouldn't there be more people talking about how influential they are? Like, I'm involved with this TV show, and it's on Hulu, and we're doing an episode on Chuck from Death, mainly because obviously how influential they are, but also his whole backstory and everything. And they're always one that you talk to somebody, even if you're not into death metal, you know who Death was and you have a respect. But if you walked up to somebody that's into Queensryche or whatever and said, oh, Cynic, they probably had no idea. But those two bands, Queensryche and Cynic, share a lot in common.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I feel like you're saying, a lot of people don't even realize that, and we've made it so far in influence now that I think a lot of young kids coming up don't even realize that bands like BT Bam or The Faceless or The Contortionists that they've grown up listening to and that they've taken influence from are so heavily influenced by Cynic. I feel like Opeth, people get that a little more, but to me, Cynic, it should be as huge as Opeth and is right up there with Opeth as far as the influence that spreads across the entire genre of progressive metal. And Paul's voice, there are bands that have vocoder, that have singing with vocoder in them, and it's because of Paul. Like, that is 100% why. it's just fascinating how far the reaches of that band have gone.
I do notice on a positive thing, a lot of like heavier shows I go to, there are a lot of Cynic shirts. So it's kind of becoming cool to wear Cynic shirts again.
That's true.
Which I really like.
It is.
I hadn't listened to this song for so long, and I go back and it's like, wow, came out in, like I said, 93.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing today. That song,
it does.
That could have been released 2 weeks ago. It's current.
Timeless. It's timeless, and I think that that's a true testament to a band's capabilities, is if you can hear a song and it's just one that you can't pinpoint the exact time that it came out of. And Cynic existed at a time they recorded with Scott Burns at Morris Sound, of course, and all of the great death metal was coming out of Morris Sound at that time, right?
Yep.
They have this like raw thing that I don't think exists as much in progressive music now either, and they've just always kind of rode that Cynic thing. If you hear a Cynic song, it's Cynic immediately. It's such a classic song.
Yeah, I think there was a youthfulness to what they were doing back then too, kind of a youthful ignorance a little bit too.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier, you a social media superstar. How did this come to be? What are you doing?
I have no idea. I wish I knew so that I could like bottle it and show my friends how to do it, but I have no idea. I just started posting videos. I was posting vocal videos, I think, at a time when not a lot of people were posting them. The first time I kind of went viral was in like 2015, and people were still looking at vocal videos being posted on the internet as being a little bit of a cringy like thing they didn't want to do. And I saw other people succeeding. I saw mainly it was drummers who were really succeeding on social media. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care if this is cringe. I don't care. I just want to get my band's name out there. And somehow my videos started getting shared around the internet. Drake has seen my videos.
I know, that's crazy.
I was on Kai Cenat last year because of it.
I know, I saw that too. And I a little bit ignorant about, I knew who he was, but I didn't realize how big he was.
I didn't.
And I saw that video and I went back, I go, that guy's really huge.
It was insane. Like, I had never heard of him before. And in fact, when his assistant messaged me to be on the show, I almost turned it down because I thought, first of all, that I was being catfished by some like random person. Second of all, I don't know anything about Twitch. I'm a little bit older than, the 18-year-olds who are really in that world, and I had no idea. I just didn't know if it would like benefit me in any way. So taking it though, I realized that's the most subscribed to person on Twitch.
It's kind of in a weird way, like when Cannibal Corpse did Ace Ventura. It's like something completely out of what you would think they would do. And we were even like, I don't know, we should do this or not. Like, it's weird, but you do it, and then all of a sudden, all these other people who had no idea who Cannibal Corpse was, and same thing with you and Entheos with that sort of stuff, and it gets into there. So, but I think the one thing that and I'm by no means an expert on social media, but I do notice that what I like is people who are very passionate about something. And your videos show like so much passion and determination. I think that's what a lot of people see is like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And you see a female doing it too, which is also like, this is really cool that she's doing it and doing it so well. And you could feel the energy in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also, metal vocals have this polarizing quality to them as well, which... the unfortunate and fortunate part of that is that when things are polarizing, they have a lot more, they can go, the wildfire can spread a lot further. So that's a part of it as well. But yeah, it's been crazy. One of the craziest parts of it to me is that people who definitely do not listen to metal will notice me on the street now. Like, I'm getting people coming up to me like, oh my God, I was just looking through all of your videos last night. Now you're right here at this gas station. This is insane.
Wow.
I never really understood the power of the internet until these videos started taking off. So, it's been fantastic for my band, most of all, which is the thing that I care about more than anything. So it's incredible.
So what's next for Entheos?
So we are writing an album right this moment. We are going to Europe in about 3 weeks, and then we're doing a headlining tour at the end of the year, our first one ever.
That's awesome. I did hear a little bit of it the other day, and it's very spectacular. So look for that.
Thanks,
when
Brian.
are we going to do that? Probably 2026?
I think 2026. We're going to put a song out before the end of the year, though.
Cool. and you have to go follow Chaney and Entheos on all the social media stuff. It's super fun. Band is amazing. If you haven't checked them out, please do. If you like any sort of heavy music, it's really good. So thank you so much for doing this. And it's
thanks
a great
for having
song
me.
to talk about too. So
Yes, it is.
awesome.
One of the best.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
There you have it. I want to thank Chaney Crabb from Entheos, Jason Suecof, Martin Popoff, as always, our theme music from Lizzie Borden, and as always, the man that keeps this train on the tracks, Mr. Christian Blatt, our producer. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you guys next episode.